good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whichever time of day I find you at. My name is Nicholas Munoz. It is August 1st of 2021, and I will be speaking to you today about mirror neurons. This is for the course about 399. This is Your Brain with Dr. Adana Romero. So, I guess you must be asking yourself, what is a mirror neuron? Well, a mirror neuron is a neuron that is very similar to one you may already know called an neuron or a motor neuron. Now, action and motor neurons are neurons that fire in your brain whenever you are performing an action. Scratching your shoulders, picking up water bottles, drinking said water bottles, any of these actions that actually makes your body move or things like that. Okay? Now, mirror neurons, they are neurons that act very similarly to action neurons and in many ways are the same. What they do is they fire at the same times as the action neurons. Now, what they do additionally is whenever you're observing somebody else performing said actions, like wiping their face or, all these other things that I should not be doing on camera, it is your brain is actually firing and creating the same virtual reality in your head. Now, whenever you observe someone create these actions, like I said, your neurons are firing, and the same way that mine are whenever I'm actually performing these things. Now, what mirror neurons are not superhuman neurons allowing you to read people's minds or create, ESP, things like that. The definition of a mirror neuron by Dr. Christian Geisers is a mirror neurons are multimodal association neurons that increase their activity during the execution of certain actions and while hearing or seeing corresponding actions being performed by others. So, like I was saying, you see somebody do something and all of a sudden, poof, your head lights up in a way that is as if you are actually performing the action yourself. We have to start with a little bit of history of mirror neurons. So in the early 90s, there was a study done by a group of neurophysiologists in an action recognition in the premotor cortex by Dr. Rizzolatti and others. Now, what they did in this experiment was they were not actually looking for mirror neurons. What they were doing was they had a macaque monkey and they had electrodes and probes all in their brain, and they were trying to map what areas of the brain were lighting up whenever the macaque was actually performing actions. Now, what they did and what they did not intend to do was whenever they left for a break, they actually left all of their machines and things on, as the story goes. And whenever they were performing their own actions, such as eating, they noticed that their equipment was lighting up. So it led them to observe that mirror neurons in the macaque were firing whenever they observed, when the macaque was observing the human subjects eating food. So, what eventually happened was this led to other tests in humans and such. In 2009, there was a test done with electroencephalograms for human beings. Now, what they did here was they did not stick probes into people's brains. People don't necessarily like things going all up in their noggins. What they did is it's an apparatus placed on the head, and they showed individuals certain actions, and they actually found exactly this, that mirror neurons were firing in the brain effectively in the same manner that whenever they perform the actions themselves, such as moving the index finger, stroking like tables, things like that. Any action that produced a response was what they were going for. Now, I know this is where things start to get a little interesting. You're thinking to yourself, okay, where does this come in terms of how I see other people, how people think empathy is actually action. So there's a lot of contesting information in these areas. Now, when you think about how mirror neurons work, you see someone acting in a certain way and your brain lights up in the same way. It is not so crazy to think that whenever someone is acting emotionally, sad or angry and such like that, that your brain would associate the same thing and light up in the same areas. However, like I said before, research is highly contested. There have been studies, particularly one where subjects were asked to identify emotions of subjects within the study. One of these subjects was a child who was bringing home a failing report card to a parent who had no idea of the situation, and they had to identify the emotions of the child being going into a stressful situation and the emotions of the adult having no knowledge of the situation, both before and after. Now, what they found in this study is that portions of the parietal lobe that associated with the same emotional centers actually lit up in the same manner that they would in individuals actually experiencing these emotions. Now, this was a correlational study, not a causational one, meaning that the areas did light up in the same way, but it was not in a way that they could say, yes, these are where the emotions come from. Just the fact that the mirror neurons did fire at the same time. What does this tell us? It tells us that the subjects did empathize with the characters in the experiment. However, it does not say that the emotions came from the mirror neurons or if that's what gives us empathy. So, like I said, this shows a correlation. But in fact, a lot of studies don't actually show this correlation. And so, essentially, there is very much conflicting information in regards to mirror neurons and what is happening in the brain. So effectively, where does this leave us, you might ask? Does empathy come from mirror neurons? Is it a type of thing? And it's an uneasy answer. Have is a situation where, like many brain science subjects and neuroscience and science in general, you effectively have a situation where we have to conduct many more experiments and see where it's at. But that is not anything to say that it is not at all related. There's a reason these studies have been conducted and are continuing to be conducted into the future. So continuing forward, I would say we need to focus and figure out what the role of mirror neurons are in empathy and see how exactly it affects our world. Finally, going over all of it, mirror neurons are a large part of how we live and how we learn throughout our world. We look at someone performing actions and we perform better because of it. We watch dances, we create mental jumps and things like that, and we go through our own mental exercises in trying to figure out our world. Mirror neurons coming into empathy, you can definitely see how there are connections in between the two, but suffice it to say, there needs to be more studies and there needs to be substantially more information, and it's a personal area I am very excited to work into in the future. With all of that in mind, the bright future of neuroscience that is going to inhabit mirror neurons and everything that it entails, I will say one final thing to you, my friend, and I will say it with all of the love and compassion I have in my heart, as Michael would say. Take it sleazy, my friend.